Hello and welcome to Springboard of Virtual University. My name is Albert Ocran. Welcoming you on behalf of Team Springboard led by Comfort. This is your most inspirational show and the point of convergence for the greatest minds. Your Virtual University is brought to you by the Springboard Roadshow Foundation in partnership with the Multimedia Group and proudly sponsored by MTN Pulse, UMB Bank, the Enterprise Group, with support from the graphic business. Bookmark page 18 of the graphic business in advance for a full transcript of today's interview, and you will be inspired by the contents. So, for weeks now, we've been traveling into the engine room with frontliners from various fields, trying to find out the what, the why, the where, the big decisions of their lives, the disappointments, the fear, the pain, what you will not find in any newspaper article or any website. And it's been an exciting journey. Today, sadly, we bring the engine room to a climax with somebody you would love to hear again and again and again. But before that, visit my YouTube page, Albert Ocran, and check out all the previous editions. I have in the studios the only man who combines the chairman and the general, Kwami, Sefa. Kwami, good to see you.
Good to see you, Albert, and thank you very much again. It's always, inspiring to hang around you.
One day we should chronicle the places we've been, the things we've done.
And the Kofodia, Tamale, Ho, and other places that we, the little pep talks we've had here, we should. It'll be interesting.
I think so. And especially some of the off-the-camera encounters with young people, the questions they ask, what they try to see and do. How important are some of these mentoring interventions that creates platforms for young people, emerging leaders to meet people who are doing it in various fields? How important is it?
It is, Albert. Some of us did not get that kind of mentorship. We did not get role models to sit us down. Most of the time, our role models were people we saw from afar. And so we just simply admired them and wanted to be like them from very far off. We didn't hear them speak to us. We didn't understand their story. We didn't get to hear about their journey. We didn't know about their successes, their failures, the turning points, the decisions they had to make and why they made some of the decisions, the regrets. We didn't get to ask them if they were faced with a reason why they probably took that decision years ago. Would they take it again? So most of us of my generation, and probably much younger, and obviously older than I am, may not have gotten that direct contact with people we admired or people we aspired to be like or people who inspired us. So mentoring young people or mentoring much younger people is extremely important because you may have gotten to a position where they see you as, oh, it happened overnight. But they should know that it did not happen overnight. You should serve as a bulwark of sorts and, as you say, a springboard for them to say, okay, let me, there's this latest, let me tap into your blessings and, move on beyond that. So it's extremely important.
You mentioned looking up to people and not getting access to them. I'm curious, who did you dig for when you were growing up?
Oh, many people.
Did you have a crush on somebody where you
some of them were people you get to meet later on in life. And I was always fascinated by somebody like Sir Sam Jonah. And one of the reasons was every time he hears, at 36, he was managing director of then, Ashanti Gold. And you're wondering, how did he do it? And in my own field of endeavor, of course, Kweku Sechiado killed me every time. And
what about him killed you?
His writing style.
Right.
You read Sechiado and you've read knowledge. You've read style. You've read a certain style of writing that sticks with you, And of course, the Grand Emperor Mike Egan, who we all thought was God on radio, in those days. And of course, others also came along, the Tommy Annan Forsons, the Charlie Sams, the George Crabs, and the rest of them. So In my field of endeavor, yes. Outside my field of endeavor, as I mentioned earlier, son Jonah, I was always fascinated by his story. But I only got to meet him several years later. And so I did not get that mentorship that we were talking about earlier. In other fields of endeavor, you've heard about other people, and of course, everybody loves Kofi Annan. I wish he was still alive, He had done what no black man had ever done and has still not done.
Did you feel sometimes that if you ever met those people and had a deeper conversation at the beginnings of your career, you would have done less trial and error?
I don't think so. I rather think that I would have been in a position to tap into their knowledge and experience and blessings. And if those trials came, even if you wanted to take a decision, you'd be like, is this similar to his? So to some extent, maybe I'd have done less trial and error, but I would have been better equipped, even if it was a trial and error period. Something you were not sure about, you probably ask, well, he went through that too. How did he achieve it? And some of them may have told you, look, just put your head on the chopping board. You have two options. The knife will either be blunt or it'll be sharp. Both ways, you walk away with a lesson.
Right.
So maybe it would have helped, yes. But
so a reference point for decision making.
I'm sorry?
A reference point for your decision
making. Oh, yes,
making.
for decision making.
Let me pull you back to the beginnings. I look at anyone I see who's a giant in any field and ask you, growing up, did you ever think you would do this?
No, I just wanted a job.
Tell me, what kind of job?
Seriously. Okay, let me tell you this. I grew up in a military establishment, a military environment. I've said this quite often or several times. So now looking back, I think I was very subtly influenced by my mother. My mother was a broadcaster, and it was very normal to turn the radio and then hear her voice. She used to present a program on GBC2 at the time called Latin American Rhythms and the Listener's Choice. So I kind of took it for granted that, that's my mother's voice, that's my mother at work. I probably didn't know that I was being influenced slowly. And I've told this story before when I was about 10 years old. There's a man I'm looking for. I pray he's alive and well. I just want to see him. His name is George Crabb. George Crabb was a big voice on GBC radio those days. And at age about 10, as far as my memory serves me, George Crabb put me on his lap in the studios of Radio 2. My mother took me to her workplace and asked me a few questions on air. And I just spoke.
At age 10?
Yeah, at about 10. I just, it's like you walk into a studio. I've done it for other kids now. And there's that deja vu I get every time I go into that thing. He just asked me, it's typical your child goes to your workplace with you and someone says, hey, come here.
Say hello to the audience.
Say hello, yeah, and you just go there. You probably don't even understand the depth of what you're doing. You're just, big deal, just talking. And sometimes I look back, I'm like, probably I was getting my first lessons with a microphone without realizing it.
What did he ask you?
I don't remember now. I won't. But there's a certain remembrance. There's a small window that keeps playing that back to me. He had this very silky voice, which I thought was cool. And he asked me your name, the usual when you're interviewing a child. I was about 10 anyway. So your name, how old are you, where do you go to school, the usual. I don't remember the specifics. But every time he plays back. And doing the microphone wasn't my preference. I grew up in a military establishment. My father was an army officer. A typical boy, normally your first hero is your dad, or your first role model is your father. If he's like me, he's a responsible, upright kind of person. And for me, growing up, it was always military vehicles, starched clothes, well-ironed, shiny shoes. Once in a while, you get to see guns, maybe not with him, but with the other soldiers around. And it was all macho and exciting for you. And as far as I was concerned, I was making a beeline into the military academy. I mean, for me, that was what I wanted to do. But my mother played a joke that turned out to be who I am today. Or my mother played a trick, So unfortunately, my father died when I was 19. And went through sixth form, did my national service. For the first time, I went to the northern part of Ghana, which is what I wanted to do. So I did my national service in a place then called Savulugu Nanton District. Now here Savulugu is separate, Nanton is separate. It's a bigger place now. I did my national service about 30 years ago, and so it was a small area. When I was returning in 1991 or thereabouts, as far as I was concerned, I was going straight to the military academy. That is all I wanted to do. And so my mother also had other ideas. And she definitely did not want me to do that.
Why?
I think my father's death was still fresh. My father had been dead just 2 years. And I think also that she probably looked at me and said, you would have a better career in the public space as a journalist, as a broadcaster, as a public speaker, as somebody on the stage, behind the microphones, in front of the cameras. She probably saw what I didn't see. Now, what actually...
So what was the trick?
I was coming to that. I had a flair for writing. And I was a bit of a class clown, a talkative person also. And I used to write all these short stories and, create all kinds of scenarios and sometimes gather the kids and become a film producer, director, and stage a play, as kids. These were my strong points. Playing around, acting, talking. I was a talkative, still am. Then my mother is also a very staunch Christian, and she insisted on morning devotions. And I'd come back from national service, 21-year-old, hot-headed, the white I own the world. That feeling when you're that age. And she would just ask me very calmly, there are other career opportunities. There's also education that you may want to look at. And you still like to write. Why don't you continue writing? And for good or bad reason, I got a story published in the then Spectator. They had a short stories column. I had written a fictitious fiction short story. I still remember the title, Allergy Conspiracy.
Allergy Conspiracy?
Yes, about some allergy who had come to take my girl. And
oh, dear Lord. Was it based on a real life experience?
A bit of that, yes.
Tell you God forgive that allergy.
But there was no allergy in the picture. It was just my own creative juices at work.
Okay.
There was a bit of truth in there, but it was just my creative juices at work getting to, exhale. And so my mom would be like, my mom is a typical Ekwapiam woman, and she'd be like, men say we need J kasa hon in achro hon. Inti bia say GIJB na be kwa na say broadcast edwuma po na be. I was like, I'm going this way out today. So I was hell bent on going that way. And as I mentioned, a very staunch Christian who insisted on morning devotion. And she was, working on breaking me down slowly. Her favorite closing verse that has remained with me till date.
Tell me.
She would say, the 10 Commandments were handed from God. And in the 10 Commandments, there's only one commandment with a promise.
Wow.
Honor thy father and mother, that their days on this earth may be long. And then she would say, whatever your parents say, pay a listening ear. But I think for some reason, she saw a bigger picture that I refused to see. Or she saw a different picture, let me put it that way, that I refused or was unable to see, or maybe unwilling to see. And so slowly, she navigated a bit. And then there's a gentleman called Alex Kayi who was a broadcaster.
Oh, Alex, I know Alex too well. We worked together for a while.
Yes, so Alex is like, yes, you went with Alex. Yes. So actually, Alex held my hand and took me to GBC. At the time, it was with GBC. So Alex is like a younger colleague of my mother those days. My mother had retired and moved on, but Alex was still, actively engaged. And then, so he took me to a woman called Janet Owusu, who had a theater group, and said, "Oh, this army brat of mine, little boy, is interested in these things. So I got involved in acting. I got involved in drama and theater. And with Janet Ousu, then we had people like the late Mark Jordan Amate, Edie Coco, Fred Amugi. Kwesi Chedakwa even passed through at a point,
yes,
you know,
yes.
to become a television actor. Naile Adefio, I can't remember everybody off the top of my head. And then as we were going through that, slowly, you know, I started enjoying the attention. You know, every Thursday on TV theater, every other Thursday you are on. And then you are getting all these little, you know, there was no social media then, but it was big to be on television at the time. And so I started getting attention drawn to myself. And I guess I started enjoying it. And I said, okay, why not? Then, of course, I did Ultimate Paradise, which easily was the biggest television soap at the time.
I had Ajitanan on the same series, and we spoke about Ultimate Paradise.
Yes.
And he mentioned you.
It was he mentioned me on that.
Of course,
it was a big thing for me at the time. This was in 1994, you know. And so I became immersed in it. And then, because it was a general GBC environment, I also got interested in radio. And one person I always give credit, who I believe gave me my first radio lessons, proper microphone speaking, blah, 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 blah. It's a gentleman who's left broadcasting. His name is Eko Budumanuel.
Oh,
Buze. Yeah.
Wow.
I was literally Buze's follow back. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Buze and I have history from Fansun.
He's a MOBA.
Yes.
Yes. So I was Buze's follow back.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I was his production assistant. And how did I become his production assistant? It was, you know, I was always in the GBC environment, and we had common friends. So Buze looks at me and he said, "Charlie, you cry, play your voice be nice, eh? Can make I send you?" So Buze actually was the first person who sat me down in a production studio for radio and showed me a few of the tricks, helped me with how to speak into a microphone on radio, and then started giving me assignments. Because it was a youth-oriented program titled Leaders of Tomorrow.
Right.
Interesting. That's the title. Leaders for those who are radio buffs those days, you may remember that show, Leaders of Tomorrow. Buze was the host.
Right.
And the head producer. So I became one of his production assistants. Myself and surprise, surprise, Elankra.
Shaky.
Yeah, man.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so Buze doesn't like me saying this, but Buze really helped me to realize my potential in the beginning. And so we did Leaders of Tomorrow for a while. And it was through that I met Egbert Fable.
Yes.
Today, the Chief Executive of Petroleum Commission. At the time, Egbert Fable was the Chief Vandal, Commonwealth Law University of Ghana, Legon. And I had friends on Legon campus. And because Leaders of Tomorrow was a youth-oriented program,
You had to go to Legon.
you know, I was hanging with the Legon guys, you know. We had this joint called Hospitality. For those who remember, I'm sure, boys aged maybe 20 to about 24, 5, go and sit down, bees, students and all of that. And so I became close to a few of them, including Egbert. Then one day I asked him, "I'd like to interview you for my youth program." And he was like, no, he's not sure he wants to do it. So we started talking. Vandalism, the way it's seen on campus, the difference between the dictionary definition of being a vandal and what being a vandal on campus is, blah, blah. Then he got interested. And, these Commonwealth guys can be very excited.
You know what's in Commonwealth?
Really?
Be careful what you say.
So you are a VMate?
Oh, very much so.
Aha. So I always say I'm an associate VMate because I used to hang with them a lot. So I don't know if any chief vandal had been on radio before Egbert. But if we don't have any, then I can comfortably say I was the first person to put a chief vandal on radio. So I convinced Egbert. And I remember when I got to GBC and we went to go on air, I had a production discussion with Eko Budman, my boss, Buze, and he wasn't game at all. It's like, Charlie, these boys, they will come disturb people for a year with their talking and you're not too sure what they're going to say, blah, blah, blah. But I managed to convince him that this guy is cool. I know Egbert is a very sharp person,
right.
Speaks very well and all. And he was a chief vandal. And to be a chief vandal, you understand what it means. He must have a following. He must have had people who bought into, his whole philosophy and image and vision and all that. So eventually Egbert comes into the studio, and this is GBC of old.
Was it live?
It was live, Saturday afternoon. So what time was it? About 4:30 or so. We record normally on Fridays, but a few of the things are done live. And of course, you have a Kobudumano with his eagle eyes watching you. And so we're going back and forth, we're talking about it, and then this is GBC of old, where standards were so high and tight. I mean, you dare not make a mistake. And then Egbert says, I always remember, we've had a laugh about this several times. And this is GBC 1994-95. And Egbert says, anyone who thinks that being a vandal from Commonwealth Hall is the same as the dictionary definition must be suffering a bout of intellectual masturbation.
I'm sure your face just froze.
Jesus, what has this guy done to use the word masturbation?
On your show.
On
GBC.
Show. On GBC.
You know what I'm thinking about? Buzer's face.
Buzer was calm. But in that calmness was like, let me catch you. The boys were being what's it. Buzer was very calm, very easy. But you could tell from his body language that Chala was hot. Yeah. And then everybody was like, this is
unheard of.
Unheard of. Pariah language. You don't use it here. And we went on and then we're done. The entire Commonwealth Hall was glued. Yeah, Chiefo. Anyway, so went through that, did GBC for a while.
No, I'm interested in the post.
I won't tell you the post.
No, I want to know what really. Come on.
No, Buzer, let me be honest. Buzer was upset, yes, but he was very calm. Don't forget, Buzer was also quite a young person. But he was kind of a straight, professional street guy. And so he didn't rub it in. He always saw me as a younger brother.
You know why I'm asking you this? The interplay between ratings, what will draw the crowd, and then also the borderline issues that are so big now in broadcasting. And I'm just wondering, was it like that? Yes. Has it been like that every time? Or these are issues that are big now that were not big those times?
We always wanted, first of all, from the little I know, having been tutored by somebody like the Venerable Sam Yeboah, it was not about ratings. It was professionalism. And being professional brought you ratings automatically. Because, first of all, we didn't have social media, where news wasn't sensationalized as it is today. You had to check, double check, and cross check before you put anything out there. But obviously now we're looking for the sensationalism of television or radio or social media. And so we've gone probably to that point where that famous saying or that famous line that says sex sells. It looks like that is what we really are focused on. Instead of discussing subjects, we're looking at sensationalism. For us who studied or who worked in that environment, especially because I was much, much, much younger, so to a large extent it's rubbed off on me. It wasn't about sensationalism. No, it was almost a no. This is not where you come and sensationalize an issue. When an issue is put on the table, it is discussed, researched, and so radio was to inform, educate, and entertain. But you see, it starts from inform, educate, and entertain. But now it looks like it's the reverse. It's educate, educate, educate. Now it is entertain, entertain, entertain. But you ask yourself, what is the stuff of the entertainment? And so if you want to compare that era and today, obviously, two totally different areas. I mean, my mother listens to radio and she's like, what do you do with my sumo?
And from the era she's coming from, you can understand her angst.
It sounds like noise. And even for me, There are times I listen to radio, and I think it's noisy.
Even for you?
Oh, yes.
This is Springboard of Virtual University. This is Kwami Sefa saying that even for him, radio is sometimes noisy. We'll go for a brief break and say a big thank you to our sponsors, MTN Pulse, UMB Bank, the Enterprise Group. And when we come back from this break, let's go into the influence of Komla Dumo. Why she? How did the family react to a broadcast journey? And by the way, when did he flash out the idea about the army? Please don't go away.
Don't be left out. Download the Pulse app from the App Store or Play Store to mash up all day, every day. You can also enjoy more mashup. Just buy the new Mega Bundle and get 3 gigabytes data, extra 400 megabytes for your social apps, and free MTN to MTN calls every Monday. So go ahead, feel the Pulse on MTN Pulse. Just be. We're good together. Everywhere you go.
There once was a man who had it all. He had skill, he had charisma. He was loved by all, but above all, he knew the importance of helping others, lifting others up. He knew the importance of giving other people an advantage so that they too would use that advantage to help others. All you need is that advantage that sets you apart from the rest. And when you discover that advantage, life's challenges don't seem so daunting anymore. That's where we come in. Enterprise, your advantage.
UMB was established in 1972 as the premier bank for the corporate and private sector in Ghana. From our very beginning, as the only Ghanaian bank serving all categories of businesses, we set a standard for excellence and innovation. Over the past 45 years, we've built a financially healthy and strong bank, demonstrated our commitment to our customers and to growing businesses, and exhibited originality and innovation at every turn. At UMB, our focus is built around people, service, products and technology. These are the key to our present success and our future triumphs. At UMB, we're poised to make a difference not only with our customers, but also in the banking industry. We invite you to share in our future. Our future starts now with you.
Hi, this is Reverend Ekua, Springboard, your virtual university. You need to keep watching this show because when you watch this, you get to make decisions based on information. So keep watching.
Welcome back to Springboard, your virtual university, and the conversation that I'm having with Kwami Sefa as we go into the engine room, the final, the ultimate edition of the engine room, with Kwami breaking down the story of his life. Very interesting components, and I'll run some of them by you. But a big thank you to MTN Pulse, UMB Bank, and the Enterprise Group for making this possible, and of course the Multimedia Group. And on Tuesday, in the graphic business, a full page with Kwami's smiling picture telling the story in print for your archives, also available on Graphic Online and My Joy Online. So, my lessons from Kwami so far, number one is about mentoring. He says he didn't get access to his role models when he was younger, and so he admired them from afar and didn't get the benefit of close interaction to learn the lessons of their lives and the process. Number two was about growing up. He says his mother presented on GBC Latin American Rhythms, and he talked about the experience of George Crabbe putting him on his lap at age 10, asking him a few questions. And he says these are seeds that today, looking back, sowed the seed of broadcasting in his life. Number three was about the army. It was his passion, his love growing up, and his father was a military man, and so he loved the military vehicles, the starched uniforms, the boots, and the guns, and wanted to become a soldier, and harbored it till after national service when the mom began to wind his mind in a different direction. He said she exposed him to different people who took him in different directions to explore his acting and other skills that have made him who he is today. He mentions radio and mentions Eko Budimanuel as the person who held his hand, the godfather who introduced him to radio and the nuances of radio. He mentions supporting him on the show Leaders of Tomorrow, and of course that very interesting encounter with Egbert Fable and the conversation about vandalism that we will not go into. But the last point before the break was about professionalism versus ratings, and he was saying that all through his training, especially with Sam Yeboah, the focus was on being professional first, and ratings or any other blessing, almost like seek ye the kingdom of professionalism, and every other thing shall be added unto you. And he says the focus was research, discussion, and then you go on to inform, educate, and entertain. But he says that has largely been flipped today to entertain, and entertain. And sometimes, even for he in radio, he finds it noisy. Kwami.
Yes, Albert.
Let's talk about the experience with Komla. Let's talk about how you ended up doing tree broadcasting.
Where do I start from? The experience with Komla, may he find rest. One of the greatest voices ever that will be difficult to replicate. He paid his dues. He became an ambassador of Ghana on his own steam, simply because he was working on the international stage. And he shone. It's sad we lost him. And may he find rest.
Amen.
You know, Komla was, interestingly, Komla first became my fan. Then he became my friend. Then he became my competitor. And then he became my friend again. I remember the first time we met at Joy FM. This must have been 97-ish or 8, thereabouts. I was with my then boss and friend, Kwekubo Afajiman Pacheco, who's a lawyer in the States today. He left broadcasting long ago. And so Komla walks up to me. You know, he's always alive.
Larger than life.
Yeah, he's always alive. Hey, Charlie, you are the video. Yeah. You know, typical Komla. And then we start talking. I'm like, hey, Charlie, I've heard your voice on you the Mobitel traffic watch, blah, blah. We just started talking. And so we became acquainted. I will not call him a good friend. We became acquainted. And so he lived his life, I lived mine. And then he took over the Super Morning Show, pushed it to heights that, you know, put the two of us in competition. And it was healthy. I believe that at a point, he just shot me out of the water because he brought new life, energy, verve, and excitement to it. And then he was going to leave for studies. So another gentleman who is an unsung hero of broadcasting, especially private broadcasting in Ghana, the late KK Dua of Case Frequency. For those of us who remember, we did all our jingles there. Radio station jingles, product jingles for advertisers, and KK was, as they say, a brother man. So we used to go and hang out at his place at Asylum Down. And there are times you walk into Case Frequency, maybe Komla is there doing a voiceover, or some other person is there, and then you just sit out, you talk a bit. Sometimes you share ideas, you bring your jingle in, you bring your script in, and peer review. Somebody looks like, Charlie, take this one, I'll put this one there. You know, so even though we're competitors, we're gracious enough to understand that, look, the space is big enough for everybody to fit in. And so I remember when I was leaving Radio Gold, I was on the verge of leaving, you know, I was in that transitionary period. Then I meet Komla and Stan Dugbe, who, also moved on to do other things with President Mahama and all of that. Then Komla and Stan were like two peas in a pod. And so Komla was like, Charlie, what is this I'm hearing about you going to a key radio station? I say, hey, I'm actually almost done and I'm going to join Peace FM. He was like, what? You did Chris? How? And I'm like,
why, he loved the competition?
No, he loved the competition. That was one. But two, he wanted me at Joy.
Oh, that makes sense.
So I remember we were sitting there. He told me he was going to Harvard very soon, and he didn't think that I belonged to tree speaking broadcasting. I should come and join multimedia. So then there will be no competition on the other side, and then everybody will be here anyway. So it will be a stronger team here at Joy FM. And then when he was going to leave, it will be good for me to take over. And I said, yeah, but I don't want to take over from you. I want to go and chart a new path.
Were you sure of yourself?
In the beginning, no, I wasn't. Honestly, I wasn't. It was, moving from an English-speaking broadcast media to a tree-speaking broadcast media. Let's be honest, at the time, we saw it as lowering standards. We didn't see tree-speaking broadcasting as sexy enough. It wasn't exciting enough. We didn't think that anything good could come out of it. And so, yes, I had my fears. But in that also, I had a certain, Charlie, let's go and try and turn this thing around and see how it will go.
What about it fascinated you? I'm a curious person, as you probably know by now.
One, it was tree.
What about tree?
Local language, everybody speaks it. All of us speak it anyway. And it was mass market. But it was like, what if it doesn't work?
Whose idea was it?
Whose idea was it? It was my boss Despite's idea. He actually headhunted me.
But did you know you could do tree?
Looking back, I didn't think I would bring it this far. I knew, yes, I could speak tree. But to use as a means of broadcast, I wasn't too sure. Then, I had to think through it a bit. And don't forget, people forget that I did not start Kokoroko. I did not. Kokoroko was started by Nana Oheninto.
Right.
He later
worked with.
Yeah, he later went to become a politician. But, Nana Oheninto's background is broadcasting and journalism. He taught it. He was a host those days of a Talking Point. And so, for him to have started it, it kind of like, okay, at least I have somebody I can look up to as a standard. So Nana Oheninto was there with Edward Fachi and Secha Popro Boateng, may he find rest. And so I walk in, and I was the alternative host, if you like. So he freed up Nana Oheninto a bit, and I was given 2 days out of 5. And so he gave him also time to, don't forget Nana Oheninto at the time too was still doing his stuff on Legon campus, he was lecturing, and he was quite political at the time too. And so I came in as a stopgap measure of sorts. Eventually Nana left to join the MPP campaign in 2000, and then Kokoroko became all mine. But he started it, and then I took it up, dusted it, polished it, brushed it, and brought it to where it is today.
And the rest is history.
And the rest is history. So when I convinced Komla, even though he wasn't convinced, I managed to let him know that, look, I'm going to chart a new path for myself. It's going to be tough, but I'm going to try. If it doesn't work, I'll take you up on your offer.
Oh, really? Oh, that sounds interesting.
He left for, studies abroad, came back. Then after a while, he left finally for the BBC. And even then, he still said, Charlie, me had to go take the show, And I said, by then, I'd also found my niche here. Tree was working for me. I had got into contact with people like Professor Kofi Ejekum. And I was beginning to enjoy my newfound space. And I realized that, broadcasting in Tree wasn't that difficult after all. It was just a matter of applying yourself and be willing to study from people who know better than you. I remember the first day I had Mununkum. I was like, eh?
So what, you have to update your vocabulary?
Of course. I remember 2 words in the beginning that fascinated me. Mununkum and Atorencham. Hey.
How do you spell Mununkum?
You know what Mununkum is? The clouds.
It sounds like a technical word.
Yeah, the clouds. The clouds. That's
and then the second one is Atorencham.
Atorencham.
And which one is that?
Disaster, catastrophe.
Wow.
And I found out, sadly, the full expression of Atorencham on May 9, 2001. The May 9 Stadium disaster.
Okay.
Atorencham Kesiye in the CMM Ghana. And slowly I said, okay, there's a lot to learn around here.
So it meant that anytime there was something that was not, the vocabulary was not familiar, you had to, even before the show, learn
the word. And you see, fortunately, there were newscasters I could learn from. The Venerable Mefia Kunedu, may she rest in peace. Sechepo Boateng, may he find rest. Then there were also my regular colleagues, Ajoa Ebueje, Schoolboy, Odea Sare, a few others who I can't easily recollect. You know.
When did you give up the army dream?
The army dream, finally. You know, sentimentally, I still wish. Sentimentally. Sentimentally.
You are retired army officer.
Unfortunately for me, I have quite a few friends in the army. And so there are times that, you know, I hang out with them at the mess once in a while. And I look at them like, Charlie, this could have been me, man. So sentimentally, yes. But truthfully, the dream died sometime in 96, when Radio Gold began. Radio Gold was my first full-time job. You know, the GBC days were all what they call a contract staff. We used to be called guest artists, you know. But my first full-time job began in 96 with Radio Gold. And I guess slowly the military dream tapered off. But a bit of me still held on to it. So that's the sentimentalism that I talk about. To think that I actually did a master's program in conflict, peace, and security.
Wow.
Yes, at the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. So the sentiments are still there. My love for defense, security, intelligence has always been latent. But I have learned, I've honed it a bit, and I'm keeping it. One day you never know. I may go back and do something with the armed forces.
I can imagine that.
Or with the security setup in general.
It's interesting that you start with an interest in the more mundane things like the uniforms, the boots, the cars, the guns.
Yes.
And then as you go on, you look at more serious stuff like conflict resolution, peace and mediation and so on.
Mediation, security, intelligence.
Let me stay on that line. Do you find that your broadcasting, your content, your focus now and the subjects that interest you have shifted from what they were 20 years ago?
Oh, yes, a lot. I mean, 20 years ago, what would be some of the things we're more excited about? Don't forget, our political landscape 20 years ago is not what it is today. We were still, to a large extent, a nascent democracy. We're going through... 20 years ago, we had just experienced our first democratically elected or changeover government. And so the issues that were on the front burner were a lot more heated, sensational than what it is today. Even though you still have the heat and the sensationalism, because social media also has a whole leg of its own. And some of our radio and television stations have also developed that sensational kind of reportage or discussion and what have you. Today, the issues, I think, we are a lot more developmental oriented. We are looking more at how, as journalists, broadcasters, media practitioners would give back. Well, that is how I see it today. Somebody may not. I am not the yardstick for anybody. I just hope that people will begin to look at the fact that we can use our mediums, various broadcast mediums, to do a lot more societal good and less of the bashing and bringing people down, and sensationalism really should be lowered a bit more. I think so. Maybe if you told me that 25 years ago, I disagree with you.
Not only has the environment changed, you have changed as a person.
But
I mean, the grey beard alone tells me.
I started off with a clean shave and then a goatee, which was very black, and now it's very grey. Don't forget, I started off, if I add my GBC days, I was about what? 22 years old. I'm 51. It's been like 30 years. I started full-time practice when I was 26, 25 going on 26. So that's a 25, 26 year full-time journey. Naturally, you have seen a lot more than others have seen today.
For you, at this stage, what's your focus as a person?
Well,
The National Developmental Scheme.
Yes, I accepted to be on the board of the NPA primarily for board experience, for corporate governance firsthand, to understand how state institutions are run. And whatever contribution I can give, of course I'm willing to give. I have come from a background of working in the public space for so long. I have been at the forefront of asking the questions, of offering solutions, of interviewing all kinds of people, of reading up, of researching. And so let me take my seat at the table and see what I can also contribute. But then also, whilst taking that seat at the table, I am now going to be faced firsthand with corporate governance in my country. Of course, you may want to look at the divided opinion. At the end of the day, when you work in the public space and you expect 100% approval rating, then you don't understand what you're doing. Definitely, there will be those who feel that you shouldn't be there. There are others who think that, yeah, let him go and get his fingers bent, and let's see what lessons will come out of it. Others will also be like, whatever he has acquired over the years, doing what he does, let us see if it is that that knowledge can be brought on board, and corporate governance in that small environment will be the grand beneficiary at the end of the day. So yes, I took it up. I have no regrets about it. I pray that I would, with a little knowledge I would impart, and with what I can also learn at first hand, it will be a good learning experience for me and save my country at the end of the day.
Fast forward to the end of your tenure as board member, what would you consider success?
That we've been able to sanitize the system, that we've been able to contribute our quota.
Just for the benefit of those who never bothered to ask what the rule was about and were much more interested in.
You see, that's why I say sensationalism. So I'm much more interested in, hey, the big post, hey, the political post, hey, you know. Those things will come, and you have to live with it. The moment you've thrown yourself out there into the public space, as I mentioned earlier, I don't expect 100% approval rating.
So you're in the regulatory...
Yes, downstream regulatory framework mostly. You know, so we're dealing with the oil marketing companies, with the bulk distribution companies, with the National Petroleum Authority itself, looking at the act that it operates under. What are the nuances of this entire industry? And how can we, if there are any gray areas, make it a bit more of a black and white? We don't have all the answers. We have a very experienced board chairman, Joe Adoyobo. He's been there. He was there previously. He's been in the oil sector for a while. He's a businessman on his own steam. And he's a fine brain.
I would just presume from where I sit, even without all this information, that if any board wanted somebody who understood the media, communication with their publics, it definitely must be somebody who has seen it all and done it all. And so from where I sit, you are more than 1,000 times qualified.
Thank you for the endorsement.
It is a proud one.
Yes, did you hear? I got an endorsement.
Oh, please.
So you see, sometimes people don't understand that there's something you said, the publics, communication, media, and how to even put your communication out there in a certain way that will get you. You need to carry people along. But sometimes, you know, we've become so polarized politically.
I'll tell you what, Esther Cover did something on my show that I will never, ever forget.
That's another fine...
Esther is a beautiful communication brain.
She's not just a brain. Brain, person, beauty, person, subain,
everything.
Attitude. I mean, unless you don't know Esther Cover.
And that's an adjustment.
And Esther is like, you know... She's seen it all. She knows it all.
I know.
But she'll still see her. She's like a typical big sister.
Yes.
You know, she has the mannerisms and the airs of a big sister.
But I'll tell you what.
Yes.
She said something about communication and why many ignore it to their biggest peril because they assume anyone can do it. And she just brought home the fact that sometimes it takes the simplicity of understanding the stakeholders you are dealing with and having the right people to communicate with them. So anyone who underplays or underrates the importance of having a comms person in the decision-making matrix could have their fingers so badly bent.
Let me just go back to add to what Esther says. You know, in the past, it was a PRO. Most PR people are never at the decision-making table. They are seen as go and trumpet what we have decided. And so they were seen as the gong beater, the communicator. We've taken the decision. We, the smart brains, have taken the decision. Go and tell them this is what we want, or this is how we are going to do it. And sometimes in those days, probably didn't have a good feedback mechanism. But today, the dynamics have changed. Now, that communications person is not the PRO of 50 years, 30 years, 20 years ago. That person now tells you that this decision you're taking, it will be so difficult to sell. So let's craft it this way. Let us bring these people on board, or that person on board. Let us start from this angle for it to have acceptability. That communications person can then go in and say, okay, let us begin with the tanker drivers because they are the loudest. And then let's go and get their buy-in. And as Esther says, it will be to your peril if you think that somebody with a background in communications is not needed in a decision-making environment.
She tells a very fine story about there being the need to do some seismic measurements on the water.
When she was in GMPC.
Yes, and the fact that the guys wanted to bring in the Navy and do it, Buga say, hey, take your time. That's She says, she tried to explain to the guys, and they were like, listen, it will waste time, and it's very expensive if the fishermen come and disturb the process.
Yeah.
Because if their nets get entangled in the machines, it will be problematic. She says, relax.
Yeah.
She goes to the chief fishermen the chiefs in the community and tells them, please, we'll be doing this thing in a couple of weeks' time, so start fishing in advance and storing the fish.
In the meanwhile, she probably went some schnapps.
Exactly.
And went to Nokofio.
Exactly.
So you bought.
And then explains to them, and of course, the cost is far less than the Navy,
But of course.
and explains to them why this is to their own benefit. She says, at the time of the exercise, the chief fishermen were the ones guarding the shore. And Kwami, as we have this conversation, I just want to bring home the fact that every profession matters.
Yeah.
And we don't only need the profs at the table making these decisions. We also need experts in various fields. And if it's of any benefit to you, I'm just making this point that everyone matters in the big scheme of things.
Yeah, I agree with you.
We should have the breadth and the width to accommodate different skills as we build the nation. Kwame, let me tell you what I've learned from you in the engine room today. 10 big lessons. And for all of you who are big fans of the engine room series, this is the final edition. I'm sure we'll come back again because the demand has been so high. But Kwame has been telling us about 10 things. One is mentoring, the fact that in his early days he didn't get access to the people he admired. Number 2 is about growing up watching his mother doing broadcasting and not wanting to do it at all, and George Crabbe putting him on his lap at age 10 and introducing him to radio and not even realizing the impact it had on his young mind. Number 3 is about the army, the love of his life. Growing up, he still loves it. And the fact that he so much wanted to do a military career and ended up at the time when he was just about to go into it, being navigated away by his mother in conspiracy with Alexei Kari, Janet Owusu, and a number of other conspirators who moved him away into the areas where he is now. Ultimate Paradise, acting, and everything in between. And then Thursday Theatre. He also talked about radio, the 4th point, and about Ekobudi Manuel's influence on the program Leaders of Tomorrow, where he was taught the ropes in radio. The 5th is about professionalism versus rating. He says Sam Yeboah drummed it into his head at the time that it was about being professional first, research, prepare, and then you educate, you inform, and you entertain. But he says it has been flipped sometimes, with entertainment being the sole consideration several times in the media. Number 6 is about Komla, the person who was a fan, became a friend, became a competitor, and then became a friend again. And he talked about the various dynamics of their relationship, including the time spent at KKDR's place, Case Frequency, and all that went on between them. And the fact that Komla wanted him to play the role that he was playing, Ajoy. The 7th is about tree broadcasting, something that looked scary at a point for him, but that represented an opportunity to try out something that he hadn't done before. And he ventured out with the help of many others, and today he's been able to do it. The 8th point is about vocabulary. He says the nature of language is such that sometimes just for reporting on something in particular, you need to learn new words and new vocabularies, but he had several experts to support him, and he learned from the best along the way. The ninth point is about the media focus. Kwami, you say the world or our nation and the dynamics have changed over the years, but I submit that you yourself have changed as a person and you have a different focus. And you say that the media must now be more developmental oriented as we seek to build our nation. And the last point is about your board role. You say you went on to sharpen your corporate governance knowledge to take a seat at the table and contribute to things that you had been talking about and debating. And you said this time you felt you should get involved and make a contribution. You say you have no regrets, and at the end of the day, you hope that you can make a difference in your role. Yeah. Kwami, what can I say? Thanks for coming through the engine room.
Well, thanks for having me on the engine room. I feel very honored that on the very last edition, you decided that I should be here. 16 others have preceded me. I'm sure they made an impact, they made their mark. And I'm happy I made the 17th. But also, let me pay tribute to a man who recently passed, and Kwesi Sinti Bafoboni. Most people know him as Babo. Babo was very instrumental in shaping my radio journey as well. He was my first boss at Radio Gold, and I was like a younger brother and a son to him as well. We had our ups and downs, but before he passed, we had it up all through. And I'm sure that if I mention my radio journey without acknowledging the role he played, I'll be remiss. And so may he find rest. I'm sure that with his mustache probably looking down on this show, and for those who know Babo very well, he had a very famous phrase. It is when the public speaks, so I can't say it, but he would say, "Don't waste my..." I'm sure the rest of you who know him will know what exactly he would have said.
This has been the voice of Kwami Sefa here in the engine room, the final edition, as we wrap up on what has been a beautiful series. I'm telling you, the one coming up next is even bigger than this, and you want to stay tuned to the virtual university. On behalf of Team Springboard led by Comfort, let me say a big thank you to you, Kwami, for swinging by.
Enjoyed it. I'm sure that we could have gone another one.
I know. We'll continue after.
I'm sure we'll.
All right, so my name is Albert Ocran saying a big thank you to MTN Pulse, the Enterprise Group, UMB Bank, the Multimedia Group, and then also the Graphic Business. On Tuesday, get Kwami's article, read it, find it on My Joy Online, and find it also on the Graphic Online. Until we come your way again next week, my name is Albert Ocran saying God bless you, and God bless you.